Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Elaine Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey.
Janine Shepard says, when we share our stories, what it does is it opens up our hearts for other people to share their stories, and it gives us the sense that we are not alone on this journey.
Hello, this is Maria, and this is Sheila. We're the Moms I Know, and we are here today to tell you our story. Our stories are the most powerful motivator of how we identify ourselves as women, as mothers, and how we interact with others as we grow. And so we wanted to share our stories so that you understand where we came to our philosophies of motherhood, of womanhood, and of parenting.
Yeah. Our stories really, they connect us. And as moms, we all have a common thread. And so it's really important that you own your story. And sometimes we are not asked for our story, or we don't think our story is worthy. And we're here to tell you, you are worthy, and your story is important. And it's important for you to tell your children stories. There are even studies done or research done that shows that when you talk to your children about the stories from their grandparents and their great-grandparents, you know, those are stories of resilience. And so that's how important it is to really to know and to own even the painful parts.
We are who we are because of our ancestors, their stories, their struggles, their joys, and whether or not we know those stories, we carry that vibration within us. We carry it in our DNA. And so we have to know those stories or accept those stories. And then as we shape our own, we can transcend the pain, we can triumph in the joys, and we can stop any dysfunctional patterns that have happened in our family lineage, and we can then make these choices for ourselves and for our families as we go forth. And also there's a study that shows that we are most who we are as women when we are girls around 9, 10, 11. That's sort of this core girl within. And sometimes in the teen years and the early 20s, we lose ourselves a little bit. And so as we have our own children, we kind of reclaim our own childhood. So we feel that with this podcast, The Moms I Know, it's important for you to know a little bit about us and our background. So we hope that you get something out of these stories, and we hope that you think about your own stories as we go forth.
Okay, do you want to get started? Or should
Sheila, why don't you start?
Okay, all right. So I'm born and raised in California, and I grew up in I have one sibling. I have an older sister, and my parents were both first generation children of immigrants. And so growing up, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and that was my parents' kind of bond. I'm half Mexican, half Irish. And so it was the Catholic Church that was their bond, I believe. And we grew up with a strong attachment to family. My mom comes from a family of 10, my father from a family of 5. And growing up, I remember a lot of holidays with definite family and a lot of cultural importance. You know, it was definitely the food, and, you know, for every Easter, every birthday, we had piñatas. As cliche as it seems now, it's just that was part really of my upbringing. And my parents, I think, you know, really did the best they could with what they had in providing for my sister and I a strong foundation. They've been married now for 55 years, and I believe part of that is because of their faith, for sure. And, you know, I graduated from high school, went to college, and really had no idea what I was going to be doing. And when I graduated, my parents asked, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, well, I can maybe become a teacher, and then I'll have the summers to figure out what I really want to do." Well, I fell in love with teaching. I became a high school teacher, and I fell in love with teaching, fell in love with influencing and being a part of teenagers, became a coach and club advisor, and really, you know, went full in, and became pregnant in my end of my late 20s, and had a baby boy in 2002, and that was like, okay, I never had planned to be a stay-at-home mom, and I actually did go back to work part-time. And what happened was I got pregnant again. We were like, no way. I was actually 3 months along before they realized I was getting upper GI work, because we had no idea that I was still nursing. There was no way I could be pregnant. But what that forced us to do was to really reconsider, because on a teacher's salary, having 2 children in daycare was about the same. So I became a stay-at-home mom. And it really fit into kind of how we had chosen to parent, which was we did home births, and we did attachment parenting. And, I nursed for a total of 6 years with the third child. And I realized, oh my goodness. So we embodied the family first. We really chose consciously to put our family first. And in doing so, there was definitely sacrifices. People like, how can you do that? We live in Santa Cruz. How are you able to? And it's just like, well, we've been living in a 960 square foot house for 18 years. That's some of the choices we've had to make. And I would not have it any other way, because it has allowed Brent and I to be present and not have to worry as much about paying the bills, because we had gotten that strong foundation. I would say that having 2 kids close together was amazing. However, it did take a toll on my body in the beginning. And, when I think my youngest was about 2.5, 3, it's when I had a body breakdown. Really had to find the balance again, because I was getting physical pain, and I chose to look inside, and I had to kind of go on a spiritual quest, because I remember being at the doctor's, and after a brain MRI thinking, am I going to be diagnosed with MS? Is it cancer? What is it? Because there were so many questions. And really, it was an inside job. And so I found the work of Carolyn Miss, and I started a yoga practice. And that was more so spiritual practice, because growing up Catholic and being a feminist, I really did not agree with the patriarchal establishment of the church. And so right when I left home, I stopped going to church. And so finding that spiritual piece of me again really allowed me to be okay with it, to take what I had learned as growing up and to take a part of that, take what I wanted from the Catholic Church, but also take what I wanted from other spiritual practices. So that was a huge piece of growth in my mid-30s. And I got strong, and I started homeschool, and that's how I met Maria. And so she had become my mentor, and homeschooling just fit into it. It fit into paying attention. It fit into everything that I believed in regards to letting my children be children and not on anybody else's schedule. And then that allowed us, we decided to have a third child. And that was a whole other kind of revolution, in the sense that after she was born, there was 5 years between my second child, 5 years, and then my third child, and those were 2 girls. And she when she was born at home. A few weeks later, I got really sick, and that was probably one of the lowest places I'd been, because I had to go to the hospital for 5 days, and from the hospital I got a superbug and was really spread thin, was really, really thin there. And I had to choose nutrition. And that's when I decided, again, making a conscious choice to dig deep, and I chose nutrition. And then what I learned from nutrition, it became my passion. And I think it took about 3 to 4 years when I realized that this is what I want to do. This is what I need to do. I need to show moms, especially who are questioning their bodies, because it happened to me after the birth of my first 2. And then here it goes after the third, kind of a body breakdown, that our bodies are strong. And that's when I started studying nutrition and started to teach about how to use food as medicine. And so here I am. I'm almost 46, and I just feel I'm in a good place. I have 2 teenagers and a 9-year-old, and they make up our life right now. And because I know that it goes, they say it's, it flies by and everything. And you hear that, especially when you have the little kids, oh, take advantage, it flies by. And it does, but you're able to be a part of it. You're able to really, it's your choice, right? It's really your choice of how you want to do this. And I believe that, I so strongly believe that this is my my dharma. It's interesting. It's like I get pulled in different directions, and my sister just brought this up actually last week. She's like, Sheila, maybe it's just your dharma, because as I've been working on the mom map, and I've been working on nutrition, I've been working on I call it my side hustle. I've always had like a side hustle, but it's just my family just always brings me back, whether it's health issues or whether it's this. It's just like, but it's all part of it. It's all part of that interweaving and the people we meet through these experiences. So I am a strong advocate of I don't want to say paying attention mothering, of conscious mothering, of really, how do I say this, of passionate mothering, of doing it with choice and finding your passion with it, because mothering is a spiritual journey. And, it's hard as, we have to keep this a clean a clean podcast. It's hard, right? But yet I wouldn't have chosen it in any other way. And right now we just got an exchange student last week from France, and here we have 4 children in this 960 square foot house, and it's lively and it's messy, but it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Passionate parenting.
Yeah.
I love that, Sheila. And it's also wonderful listening to your story. I knew bits and pieces, but things came out today, how similar our paths are.
Okay.
And so as I head into mine, you'll hear some of these. And so, of course, we would be kindred spirits and friends and have come into each other's lives in this way and want to share. So thank you so much. So I am also the granddaughter of immigrants, and my parents were the first children in this generation, also a native Californian, born in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was the first daughter after my older brother had been born. So my brother was the first son, born to families that had not had, well, on the Armenian side, they had not had a son for 2 generations. And so when my brother was born, he was the first son. And in that background, that's pretty important. Then I came along, I was the first daughter. And again, this sort of hope for this next generation, growing up with grandparents that were incredibly loving, incredibly giving, parents that were doing a wonderful job. But both of my parents, because they were children of immigrants, education had been the highest priority for all of my grandparents, that their children would grow up in the United States, get college educations, and make something of their lives. And so for me, growing up in this family, I also have a younger sister, so I was the middle child. Growing up at a time in the 60s and 70s in the Bay Area where children were children and parents were parents, we had a great deal of independence, but we also had boundaries. And so we were that generation that was allowed to just play outside after school until, just be home by dinner time. We had our own lives at school. Our parents had their own lives. My mother was a stay-at-home mother, but she also had a lot of volunteer activities. She was very involved with the university at Berkeley. She had environmental organizations that she was a part of. She was one of the founders of the Save San Francisco Bay Associations. She was always busy with her things, but she was present as a mother. My father worked hard and provided for us, and we went to school. That was what we did. We went to school, we came home, we got to play as long as our homework was done, and we just had to be home for that dinner time. And so growing up in that atmosphere, I think we had a lot of resourcefulness, but we also sometimes didn't get the focus that maybe I would have really wanted. And also in elementary school, I was teased at a certain point. And so for me, there was this sideline going on of what was happening at school for me that my parents weren't aware of. And I never thought to really involve them in it because there was such a clear separation between our lives and their lives. And so when I was growing up, I think I didn't spend a whole lot of time really exploring who am I, what are my interests. It was just this childhood where we were just being kids. And so when I look back at who I was at that age, I was writing some poetry, I was out in nature, I was a little bit of a tomboy. I loved the physicality of climbing trees and of adventuring. And yet in my teen years, I think I really lost a lot of that in trying to fit in. I think there was this real focus on trying to fit in. So when I was in college, I also got fairly sick. And so my health journey, my nutrition journey really started back then in my 20s. So I've had this path of really looking at the optimal types of nutrition and alternative healthcare. So I think that foundation was laid before I had children. But when I met my husband, he already had a 4-year-old son. So I just kind of plunged right into being that stepmom. And then we got married, and then we had our own children, a boy and a girl. And I knew that I wanted to parent a little bit differently. I think that there was this desire to go deeper into the parenting journey. Again, I'd had a lovely childhood. My parents were very caring. They were present. They were doing a wonderful job of parenting in the way that parents parented in the 60s and 70s. And yet, I think there was this desire for a deeper connection. So I was in education. My family had always been in education. I had gone into teaching. I was working in a preschool before I had my own children. And then I had my elementary credential as well. So my background is early childhood education and elementary education. And when we had our first son, I just assumed I would go back to work as well. And the minute he was there, I took one look at him and went, oh yes, no way.
Yes.
I'm not going to miss a moment of this. And so luckily I was able to stay home with my son. And then 2 years later, our daughter was born, again, very close together, like Sheila's experience. And we started on that parenting journey. And we were living here now at this point in SoCal near Santa Cruz, and just made a decision to stay a nuclear family, living and loving and learning together. And so we have a little farmstead, and so we were going to live off the land as much as we could, raise the children with intention. I love that passionate parenting. I was going to be the best mom in the world. And so I wanted to really honor who my children were. I wanted to listen to them. I wanted to pay attention to their needs. I wanted to see what their strengths were and how I could foster that. And I think that looking back at this generational pattern, the immigrants that came just to survive, and then their children that were going to get the best of what California and the United States had to offer, and then us children being a product of the 60s and 70s. And of course I see these things now, which I didn't see then. And so with that raising of our children, we really focused on family first, on adventure, on lots of wonderful literature and storytelling, and extended family and good friends. And so those early years were really magical. I have to say, I look back on those times with our children, and it was just a very, very special time. And so when it was time for school, of course, our families had always gone to public school. Public education is the foundation of democracy. And so off my son went to kindergarten, and it was okay at our little neighborhood school. Although I had this feeling that there was something more. And then when he started first grade was not fine. And he had some pretty difficult experiences. And during that process, I spent a lot of time trying to help him feel comfortable. And the more time I spent with him, I realized I wasn't really comfortable. So that created our path of homeschooling. Our neighbor handed me a copy of Joseph Chilton Pierce's book, The Magical Child. And I read that book, and I went and heard him speak. And I realized in that moment that honoring him for exactly who he was meant pulling him out of that school at that time. It wasn't the right match for him, which also started our homeschool journey, because we started homeschooling with another district nearby. And I wanted to be a part of our local community. So I went to our local school board and I said, we'd like to be homeschooling through our local district. And they said, well, put a proposal together. So I put a proposal together, and to my delight, they actually accepted that proposal and then asked if I would like to be the teacher in charge, which was not my intent. I just wanted to homeschool my children through our local school district. But I was a credentialed teacher. I had the background. So we plunged right in, which is a lot of times how I do many things in life. So we started homeschooling through our local school district. That program started with my son and one other child, and within a few years had grown to be a very vibrant program with a waiting list. And I have to say that I think that the success of that program was based on the fact that I was listening to the needs of the families. The program was started from our family's needs, and so I always wanted to honor the family's needs first. So the program has evolved over the years. It's changed. Different families have come and gone through the program, and that is where I met Sheila and her beautiful children. And so we have created this together. And that homeschool program was one of the pioneering programs in this area. This was 25 years ago when not very many families were homeschooling. This was a whole different paradigm. But I really come back time and again to this concept of when we honor children's needs, when we honor families' needs, we can create what it is that is going to be the most substantial and nourishing for them, whether it's educational needs, nutritional needs. We always have to really focus on those individuals, because every single child is unique. Every child is an individual. Every family is unique, and the constellation within there is individual to them. When I say listening to the needs of children, I don't always mean that we let them rule the roost or that we do everything they say. There has to be the boundaries around that. And so these are areas that we'll be getting into in future episodes, but today we wanted to lay that foundation of who we are, how we came to this journey of parenting with passion, parenting with intention, and hope that you will take some time to think about what is important in your story, what from your past has contributed to who you are as an individual, as a mother today, as a parent today, and how you want to go forth with your parenting. So fun to hear the two stories together.
Yeah, they are very similar. And I think, we're both California natives, from the Bay Area, and then we met down here. And there's a few things that I'm so grateful for meeting Maria, for her starting this program, because she the magic of childhood. And that's something that she inspired our family to jump in. And we both, my husband and I, we're adventure people, and so I think that was another thing how we connected was with the adventure. We you had a Westphalia, we have a Westphalia, right? Just so many simple things. But the literature, when I look back at my homeschool journey for 10 years, like, what is the high point? I think it's the literature, really, and just the adventure and everything. And I also want to say one more thing about the needs, because I think that piece is so, misunderstood. In the sense that we really need to pay attention as moms. What are our needs? We need to name those, right? And then the other piece is that I like how you said, like, the boundary piece. But when children are acting out at any age, it's because their needs are not being met. Yes. So how can we help them define their needs just as much as we need to define our own needs? But how can we help them, empower them to name their needs so that we can help them? Because they can't, when they're 2 years old and they're crying, or 1 year old and they're crying, we take it personal, right? Right. In the moment, we're going to take it personal. But with the hindsight, with the somebody saying, what are their needs, what's not being met.
Yes, we all want to be seen, heard, and honored for who we are as adults. We need to look at those with our children. And so we will be covering all of these types of things. I'm looking forward to an episode on literature, on boundaries, on all kinds of things needs, as we head into this. So we hope you've enjoyed today, and we look forward to sharing with you again in the future.
All right. Thanks for joining the Moms I Know.
Thanks for joining us today for the Moms I Know. To learn more about Sheila and her online program, The Mom Map, visit purplebeetnutrition.com. To learn more about Maria and her group programs and retreats, visit SoCalEssentials.com. That's SOQUEL Essentials.com. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Moms I Know. Until next week, have a joyful family journey.